last few days if you're in the northern Colorado area. And so the next rains we get, you will be able to capture that with your rain barrel. So as just mentioned, I am the Education and Outreach Manager for the Colorado Stormwater Center at CSU. You may or may not have heard of us, but what we do is we advance stormwater management throughout Colorado by conducting practical research and providing education and training opportunities like these. All of these letters in blue are links. So when you receive the PowerPoint presentation after the event today, you can go back and you can access these resources. So for almost all of the blue lettering you see, those are links. So I really invite you to check out our website. We have a ton of available resources. The link for the training is all of our upcoming opportunities. And then we have a lot of research as well on a whole variety of stormwater measures. Additionally, we have a stormwater symposium every year. The recordings from 2020 are listed, and then our next symposium in 2021, the date is currently being solidified, but it'll be in August. And if you would like to keep up to date on all of the events and happenings and research, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter below. We'd like to thank the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment for their support and funding. Without their support, these trainings would not be possible. Okay, so today we have a lot to talk about. We're going to start with, why do we need to conserve water in the first place? Amanda was talking about the water shortages that we're seeing, and so we will get into that. What is rainwater harvesting? The specific regulations around the Colorado rules for rain barrels, they are different than other states. The best type of rain barrel system to install for our climate, the supplies you'll need, step-by-step instructions on how to install yours, best practices for winterizing, maintenance, and the frequently asked questions that I receive, how to decorate your barrel, and our collective impact. So to start with, let's talk about, where is the water? I know it's hard to believe that we're in a drought, given that we just had 2 full days of rain. But as Amanda was stating, I think we were on the same webinar from the other day. Right now, northern Colorado is kind of in an oasis pocket. We are receiving more rain than other parts of the state. Almost all of the rest of the state is in a severe drought. Where we get our water from is the West Slope, and the West Slope has significantly less water or snowpack than previous years. So we have decreased water availability. Complicating that is that we have increased population. I'm one of those people who moved to Colorado and is never going to leave. I'm from Texas originally, and I think myself, like most other people, you move here, you fell in love with Colorado, and then you stay. So we have massive increases in population. And additionally, we have increased priorities for our water on our river. Now, what does that mean? So very briefly, Colorado water law. Colorado water law has what's called the doctrine of prior appropriations. So what that means is the first people to put water to a beneficial use in our state had senior water rights. So if you imagine a line of people, like 1 to 100, the first person in line has the most senior water right, and the last person in line has the most junior water right. In years of plenty, everyone gets their water, and it works, like it should. Everyone gets the correct amount of water for their right. In years of drought, which we're seeing more and more years of drought, it's becoming the rule instead of the exception, like Amanda was also stating about the multi-year drought we're most likely going to be seeing. You might think that each person in line would get a little bit less, so that everyone would get a little bit, but that is not the way our system works. How our system works is the first person gets their entire allocation, the next person gets their entire allocation, and on until there's no more water left. So when you have a more junior water right, there may be years or a lot of years where you don't receive any water at all. And that's a stressful situation, especially if you are dependent upon that water, as we all are. Additionally, so there are different uses of water as well. The first use that we really see with the most senior water rights is agriculture. But we also have the different water providers and municipalities using the river water for drinking. We have environmental uses. How much water needs to be in the river so that the fish and aquatic life can survive and thrive. We also have recreation interests in the water. How much water needs to be in the river so that we can have the all of our water sports. And then we have environmental uses as well, and industry. On top of that, we have climate change. We have, especially last year, have seen massive increases in events that are outside the norm of what we typically see, including our forest fires. And those affected pretty much all of our water. What we'll see this year is because of the damage to the vegetation, all the burn area, when the snow melts, we're going to see a lot more ash in our water system. And then finally, we have high water use. In Colorado, or the average American uses 160 to 200 gallons of water per day. In Colorado, we use half of that on our outdoor irrigation. And that is typically on our lawns. So just to give you an example, it's pretty hard to figure out or to think about how much water we use on our lawns. So I wanted to give you an example. So if you think about 100 square feet, which is roughly the size of an SUV, that uses 124 to 186 gallons of water per week. And that is dependent upon if you're watering 2 or 3 times per week. That might not sound like a lot of water, so I wanted to put that in perspective. I did use Fort Collins. I know this is more about the Berthoud area, but in the Fort Collins area, we have about 100,000 homes. I think we can all agree that we will have an SUV-sized lawn in most of those, and in a lot of those cases, a lot more than that. But if we're just to use that 100 square feet number, there is 18.5 million gallons of water used per week on our lawns, which is astronomical. So those numbers add up. Indoor, as I said, 50% is used outdoor. Indoor, where the majority of the water is used, is on the toilet. And then it's 11% for shower and 1% for bath, but I combined those. You might be surprised by the dishwasher only being 1%. I have kids, so I use my dishwasher every day, but the reason why that's so low is because they're highly efficient. The other number I just want to point out is the leaks. 5% for leaks is a lot of water. Before I had contacted my water provider about, they have what's called an Eye on Water, which is an app. And I'm not sure if every municipality has, it's called the same thing, but basically it's a smart meter. So you get instantaneous alerts if you have a leak in your home. Before we had that meter, we actually have a little bit of property and had goats. And one of the goats turned on a spigot in our field, and we didn't even know. It turned it on with its horn, and our water was running for over a day, and we didn't even know. So by having that smart meter really helped us to be able to identify those leaks immediately. So I would highly recommend calling and checking to see if that's a possibility. You might already have a smart meter installed. And in our case, I called and they were planning on installing it anyway, and then they came out right away and switched it, which I was very grateful. I really love this graphic from the EPA, or the WaterSense EPA, because it really just shows how much water we can waste without even knowing. There's no way for us to see how many gallons are being just deposited on our street curb or in our landscape when we leave the water on or forget to turn it off. So now that we know there's a problem, what can we do? You can purchase WaterSense products. Again, this is linked. And what those are certified products through a third party to ensure water efficiency standards. And they have a whole host of different products, including toilets, shower heads, faucets, irrigation controllers. And at a lot of the different water providers, you can get discounts for those. In addition, as Amanda mentioned, there are a lot of resources. And if you're not in the same water district that we're speaking with today in Berthoud, check with your water provider, because many of them offer the free outdoor irrigation audits, irrigation equipment rebates, a lot of discounts through Resource Central, lawn removal services, and indoor and outdoor rebates. So be sure to check. If you're going to make these changes, you should definitely get money back. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about how we view the rain. On the left here, this image is from Rainwater Harvesting for the Drylands and Beyond by Brad Lancaster. I highly recommend his books. He is an expert in rainwater harvesting from the Arizona area and has been doing a lot of different varieties of rainwater harvesting techniques for the last 20 years. And I just love his books. He has 3 different ones out. So this image is from one of his books, and it really showcases how our systems were built. And if you just drive around your neighborhood, you can see that systems are still being built this way. Our homes are built on the top of a slope, and our water is being directed around our homes and away into the curbs in the streets. There's a good reason for this. You don't want water sitting against your foundation, but this is kind of viewing water as a nuisance. And so you're trying to remove the water from your property as quickly as possible. The result of that is that when water moves quickly across a landscape surface, you're removing soil, debris, nutrients from your yard and depositing it onto your sidewalk, your driveway, and then the street. You may see or notice after the heavy rains we had that this was the case in your home. So additionally, once that water leaves your house, it was clean when it hits your roof, and then it picks up all of those contaminants, puts it into the street where it picks up pet waste, trash, and debris. In some cases, that water gets routed directly into our water bodies. And in other cases, it's funneled into our water treatment, where it's then cleaned of all of those contaminants and then sent back to your house, to your tap, to be used on the landscape. And I know that we had some hail the last few days, and so rain can also be seen as like an annoyance or something to fear, save my veggie garden from all of the hail or your cars. So that is one way that rain can be viewed. Alternatively, for rainwater harvesting, we're really trying to view rain as a resource. This image on the left is utilizing the water harvesting principles of slowing down water, sinking it into your soil, and allowing the water to really build up this oasis at your home. Instead of having to use drinking water on your landscapes, you're utilizing the water that falls for free from the sky. And so this is just an image of what that could look like if you're viewing water as this abundant resource instead of a nuisance. So be a happy corgi and go enjoy the rain and be excited when it's raining today. Rainwater harvesting is the collecting, storing, and putting rainwater runoff to use at your home. It's easy to collect using your existing gutter system. So I really like this house image because it just shows you how much water is going to one location, one downspout in this for this particular home. So there's all these different downspouts that are connected, and they come out right here. So if I were guessing, I would say that these folks have a very wet area right here beside their house, which is perfect for rain barrels. So we want to be able to turn kind of this problem area into a resource by collecting that rain and then using it where you want it to go. Why should we use rainwater harvesting? It's free. It reduces the demand for treated municipal water, saves money on water bills. Water rates will be increasing. As we have more instances of those multi-year droughts, we will see those changes to our water delivery systems. And plants love it. In Colorado, we don't have the same issues as those downstream of us, like in Arizona have. What happens is, since we are a headwater state, we get the water first, but as it's reused and reused and reused, it gets more salts in it. So in Arizona, one of the issues that they have is that their irrigation water is very, very salty. And so they will actually see rings around their plants of salt, and the plants can't handle all of that salt, and so they don't thrive. Rainwater actually flushes out the salts in the soils, and so plants love it for a variety of reasons. One of the questions I get when I talk about rainwater harvesting is, well, that sounds like a great idea, but we don't get that much rain in Colorado. So I always want to talk about how much rain we actually get here. In Berthoud and Fort Collins area, we get 16 inches of rain per year, approximately. Now that doesn't sound like very much water, but 1 inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof, which is really a section of roof, and roof lines are usually much larger than that, will yield over 600 gallons of water per 1 inch of rain, or over 9,600 gallons of water per year, which is plenty of water for a rain barrel or a rain garden. What can you water with your rain barrel? A lot of different things. You can water your food production gardens, you can water your pots, your annuals, you can water your greenhouse plants, or you can use them to water your native plants or establish your native plants and rain gardens. There are 2 types of rainwater harvesting systems. One is a passive system, which uses gravity to direct and flow the flow of water. This allows for greater infiltration because in Colorado, the typical rains that we get, kind of the exception was the last few days, but typically we get short, intense rainfall, and we have a lot of clay soil. So the water doesn't have time to infiltrate into our soils. It just hits our water, that's our land that's sloped, and runs down into our streets. By incorporating more rainwater harvesting strategies, you're slowing down that water and allowing it to infiltrate. So an example of this would be rain gardens. Or an active system, which we're talking about today, is how you collect and store water for future use in rain barrels. Very briefly, I wanted to talk to you about what a rain garden is. It is most simply a garden watered by the rain. It incorporates a couple of different components. One is a basin, which is right here, basically a hole that you're digging, and then a berm on the lowest point of your basin, which really just stops the water so that it can have time to slow down and infiltrate. It's not creating a pond. There's no liner to it. Creating a pond is actually illegal in Colorado based on our water rights. All of the berm is doing is allowing the water to be trapped in the basin for long enough that the water can infiltrate. Native plants are critical for a rain garden because they are adapted to our climate. They're drought tolerant. They can handle the times that we get a lot of rain and then no rain. And then the vegetation breaks up our soil, those clay soils, and helps increase infiltration. Then the mulch acts as a super absorbent sponge, prevents weeds, helps to insulate the soil, and reduce evaporation. So by allowing the water to infiltrate, we are really helping the water to get to our rivers slower so that we have more water available later in the season. When we're viewing rain as a resource, one of the things that we can look at is our drainage issues. Do you have any? So turning this nuisance issue into a resource, how can we create or utilize this water that's just ponding in an area that we don't want it to pond into a resource instead? So this is my house and this is my driveway. This is not where I want the water to go. And so what I did, my whole yard slopes this direction. And so what I did was incorporate rain gardens higher up so that it could capture that water and infiltrate it, and to reduce the amount of ponding I was having on my driveway. Here's just an example of the rain garden that I installed. I find it really helpful to see images of what that could look like. So here in the top left is the before picture. I had 8 rose bushes. I had weed barrier and rock in that area. And it's a little bit hard to see from the small picture, but it was not attractive. There was grass growing and weeds growing all up in there. So I removed all of those and I planted 40 native plants instead. This one you can see was right after it was planted, and you might be thinking that's a lot of mulch, but as the plants grow, as you can see in the lower pictures, you cannot see all of that mulch any longer, and the plants will grow together, and there'll be hardly any mulch visible at all. I will be talking about native plants briefly later on, but these are a couple of my favorites that I have found in my rain garden. So if you're thinking about planting, as I of course am right now, I want to get out in my garden. But chocolate flower is a really fun native. It kind of cascades and it smells just like Hershey's chocolate. I was a little bit worried that my son was going to try to eat them because they smell so much like chocolate, but we haven't had that issue yet, and they're just beautiful. In the lower right, these are harebells. And as I mentioned, I'm from Texas, and these remind me of bluebonnets, but they are very long blooming and they can tolerate shade. And so I have found them to be one of my favorite additions. And Coronado hyssop, there's a lot of varieties of hyssop. This is called a hummingbird mint. But we had hummingbirds for the very first time in my yard because of adding in these hyssops. So here is June, and then there was fall. So you can see kind of how that rain garden built and developed over the one season. And so this year the plants will be even larger. And if you have done the garden in a box from Resource Central before, they give you those timelines of first year, second year, third year. Third year is when the plants are established and look their absolute best. So I'll just pause for questions. I do see one in the chat. Go ahead, Jess.
Great. Yeah. So we have a question that came in earlier, and I don't know if you'll have a specific answer, but maybe just some recommendations when kind of approaching this topic. But a homeowner needs new gutters, and they are kind of hoping that maybe the contractor that they have to put new gutters on their house can also kind of incorporate a rain barrel system. Is that something that you see, out there? Do you know of anybody? Is that kind of two different things that you have to do separately?
I don't know of a gutter installer who will install the rain barrel for you, but let's talk about that after I show you how easy it is as well. But if you still want someone to come install them, I do know someone who was doing that before, and so I could create that as a resource afterwards.
Yeah, great. No problem. Yeah, it is kind of, I couldn't think of any off the top of my head either. So,
and I also have a fantastic recommendation for someone to install the gutters. Absolutely, they were great. Yes, they installed them on my house, and they were fantastic. So I'll include that too.
Perfect. Awesome. Great. So we have a question that's kind of a bigger picture. Again, don't know kind of what information you will have on this or insight, but if collecting rainwater is so good and is recommended, why is there kind of a limit on how much we are allowed to collect? Does this kind of go back to that water rights kind of legal side of things?
Yes. How long do we have for me to answer this question? So basically, the very short version of this is that originally, because of our doctrine of prior appropriations, the way that water was viewed is that every single raindrop that hit your house already belonged to someone else. And so there was a lot of discussion. People feel very strongly about their water. People have a lot of feelings about it. And so even to get the rain barrel law that we currently have passed, it took a very, very long time. And studies were shown that you are not reducing the amount of water available by having rain barrels. The way I kind of explain it is, unless you fill your rain barrel up, put it in a truck, and take it outside the watershed, it's still using it on your property, and it's making its way down through the groundwater to the river. And so I really hope that we're able to increase later on the amount of water that we can collect, but we need all of you to say, why do we have restrictions? Why are we the only state with restrictions? So I hope to see that change later, but for now, I'm very excited that we're able to collect some, and then fingers crossed for those being expanded later on.
Yes, yeah, I know. Right when I moved here, they just kind of switched over to being able to have 2 rain barrels. So that does feel like a very small win, but we will take it. Great. We have a question about the depth of a rain garden. Kind of how deep does that garden need to go to have that kind of basin form?
So there are a lot of calculations involved in picking the correct depth for your rain garden. It's based on the size of your roof, so how much rain you'll be collecting in that certain area for that downspout. And it's also based on the amount of infiltration that you get, because you have to have And if you have just clay, the water will not infiltrate quickly enough for you not to have standing water. So it's all based off of the different requirements of your specific site, but I have a very detailed how to design your own rain garden webinar. So if you're interested, you can have my contact information afterwards and I can talk to you more about that.
Great, perfect. And then I will just take this one last question. So somebody has asphalt in their roof shingles. Should they be concerned about using that water on a vegetable garden, elsewhere kind of on their landscape?
Great question, and I will get to that one later, but
Perfect.
The short version is you can use it on your veggie garden, but I will give specific recommendations for that.
Great. Well, let's keep on going. I know we have some more questions, but I think you will also answer some of them.
Okay, great. Okay, so as we were saying about the regulations in for Colorado rain barrels. So in 2016, rainwater harvesting was legalized for the very first time in Colorado. That was a great day, but there are restrictions. You can have a maximum of 2 rain barrels with the combined storage capacity of 110 gallons or less. So that means, so there's a lot of different sizes of rain barrels. You could get a 40-gallon rain barrel, but this law states that you could still only have 2. So you're not maximizing the amount of rain you can collect by getting the smaller rain barrels. You can only use it for outdoor purposes. So that's watering your lawn, your plants, or your gardens. The container has to have a sealable lid, and this is to prevent mosquito breeding. And you cannot drink or cook with the water from a rain barrel because it's not being treated and it could have contaminants that could harm you or your pets. So you cannot water your livestock or your pets with rain barrel water either. Some considerations for you are homeowners associations. Check with your HOA before you purchase your rain barrel. They could have aesthetic requirements or location requirements. So, you know, the rain barrel has to match the color of your house, or it has to be behind a fence, that sort of a thing. But HOAs cannot prevent you from installing a rain barrel. They might think they can, but they cannot. That was specifically stated in the law that it cannot be prevented. So that's great news, but definitely check with them because, again, they can dictate what it potentially looks like and where you put it. Winterization is needed for your rain barrel, just like your sprinkler system for your lawn. And you also need to be thinking about where your spigot goes. That's where the water comes out of, and your overflow planning. Overflow is so when your rain barrel fills up and then more rain comes, where will that extra water go? Here are a couple of rain barrel types that you might see when you're searching for rain barrels. And I just want to point out some pros and cons of these that I have noticed. So for the first one, get my laser pointer back again. Okay, so I have seen this type a lot. This has a planter on the top right here, which sounds like, you know, oh, that looks nice having plants on top, but you're basically having a potted plant on the very top of your rain barrel. And this is where this downspout would go, or into the rain barrel. So one of the concerns with this is if you do not have a plant in there, this is a shallow depression that will collect water when it rains. Mosquitoes actually breed in very shallow water. So this, in essence, will be creating a mosquito breeding zone, which we do not want to have next to our house. Additionally, this spigot height is very close to the middle of the rain barrel. So you will only be able to get out the water that is above your spigot height. So you're really reducing the amount of water that you can get because of how high the spigot is. So when you're looking at rain barrels, really make note of where the spigot is located, because again, that is just going to be determining how much water you can actually use. This next one has a screen on top, and so it's filtering out some of those leaf debris and whatnot that comes off of your downspout. But The problem with this is that the screens, I highly doubt that the screen holes are small enough to keep out bugs and mosquitoes. So you're having an issue with that there. And then it's also letting sunlight in. And when you let sunlight into water that is stationary, that's just sitting there, then you will get algae growth. So there's two problems with that one. This is just a different type of top. Same issue. I can see the holes from here. So that one definitely can let mosquitoes in. So I don't recommend that type. So this type right here, so you might be looking at this and saying, okay, it has a lid, and when I put it on, it's sealed. That's true, but how many of us are really going to run outside and remove the lid whenever it rains? I know I wouldn't. What if you're not home? You know, it's just very inconvenient. So having this open type lid will definitely cause you a lot of issues. Also, safety-wise, things can fall in there. So I do not recommend that type of rain barrel lid. This one, here's just some things to think about. This type the downspout goes directly into the rain barrel here. I don't see any sort of system where you're reducing the amount of, you're filtering out anything that goes into your barrel. So at my house, we have trees that overhang our house. And so I get a lot of pine needles in my gutter. So all of those, because there's no diverter here, there's no filtration system here or leaf trap, then all of that will be going into your barrel, which then what happens is it all settles at the bottom here. And whenever the water comes in again, it's mixing up all of that debris at the bottom, and the water that comes out will be pretty dirty, and it will probably smell. So either put in some sort of filter there to try to keep some of that debris out. And then also winterization will be very difficult because now you've cut your downspout off right here. And so when you remove your barrel for the winter time, because you need to remove it, otherwise it will freeze, then you have to either get a downspout extender or save that part of downspout that you cut off, because if you don't do that, water will run right against your foundation and you'll just have a sheet of ice freezing and thawing on your house, which will cause foundation issues. This is the last one that I found, and it looks neat. You know, it comes together in little squares. You can make different configurations with it. You know, I've seen you can make it kind of look like a little seat as well. Don't sit on it because it's like foam, but it was used decoratively for like planters and different things like that. So you might be wondering how the water stays in there. And that has a bag inside, and it's extremely difficult to clean. So you'll have to clean out your rain barrels. You're going to get different stuff in there, you know, that leaves that pollen from last year, ash. And so if you just have a bag that you're trying to clean, it's just going to be difficult. So my job, what I'm trying to do today, is to give you ways to install your rain barrel that it's going to be easy for you to install, easy for you to clean, easy to maintain, easy to winterize. So these are the ones that I would stay away from for those reasons that I just stated. So the type that I do recommend is a rain barrel system with a diverter. This is the diverter right here. It's easy to clean out. It has an extremely simple install. The overflow will go down your existing downspout. So when the rain barrel fills up, water will come out here and go down your existing downspout, just like it normally would before you made the modification. And then extremely easy winterization. You just remove your diverter and put on the winterization cap. So for our particular climate, I think this is the easiest system to use and winterize. In other places, you know, like Arizona, where they don't have the freezing, then there's other systems that might work best, but this is what I have found to work best for us. Where to buy them? There's a lot of different places that you can buy rain barrels. What I wanted to put together for you all today is how to find them for the most economic way to purchase them. So Colorado Raincatcher is local to Fort Collins. Right now, they're having a discount code, and I listed it here. So that's for their DIY upcycled rain barrel, which is blue and looks like these pictured here. And you also get the installation kit with it. So that's the code you can use. Normally it's $70. It's now $65 with that code. Blue Barrel is another way so you can get a barrel. They have a lot of really cool attachments. And so I like going on their site and checking out all the really neat rain barrel things that you can get in addition to kind of the regular just barrel and attachment kit. What they do is they partner with local providers. And so the closest, from when I checked last time, the closest distributor that they work with is in Lafayette. And so you can go onto their website, which is linked here, and see if that would be something that you would like to do. They also utilize the same diverters that I will be recommending, and they're a great company. You can also get rain barrels in your major box stores. Just beware of the types that I already listed and kind of my cautions against getting those. And then beware Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. So back in the before time, before COVID, I was doing rain barrel workshops in person. And so I went to go buy, I wanted 50 rain barrels. And so I was trying to upcycle rain barrels and find ones that had been used. And so I found a listing on Facebook Marketplace for, they had like 100 rain barrels. And so I thought that was perfect. So I asked them what was in it, and they told me that it was food grade soap. So that's fine, I can rinse that out. I got there and it was hydrochloric acid. So really beware of what was inside the barrel that you're purchasing. The best practice for chemicals is they rinse it 3 times, whatever that chemical is. If it's a caustic chemical, that's the requirement. But even if it's been rinsed 3 times, those contaminants can leach into that plastic. And then when you are sitting water in it from your rain barrel, those contaminants leach back into your rainwater, and then you're putting it on potentially your veggie garden. So I do not recommend that. I just really want to caution you. Make sure that the rain barrels that if you decide to get them used, that they are food grade and that you know what was in them. Here are the costs associated with the supplies that you need. I put down a couple of different options. So, I didn't mention container reclaimer. So on the previous slide, container reclaimer is in Longmont, and I worked with them in the past, and they upcycle all food grade rain barrels. They have some different kinds, but they do have food grade plastic rain barrels. So you will need to most likely clean it out because they just collect the rain barrel and then they sell them. They are $20 though, and they are in, I put Longmont here and I meant to say Lafayette. So they're in Lafayette. The DIY 55-gallon rain barrel with lid, and DIY meaning that you would have to drill in the spigot and the intake for the water to come in and the spigot for the water to come out. So those are not already installed for you. So these are 2 of the same exact barrels with the same installation requirements, one for $20 that you need to clean out and one for $40 with Colorado rain catchers that you will not need to clean out. Again, Colorado Rain Catchers is having that sale, so it would be $35 instead. The rain barrel adapter parts, my favorite rain barrel adapter kit that I have found is from Colorado Rain Catcher. I've worked with them in the past, and so they have my favorite components, which I'll be showing to you later, and they sell those for $30. When you might find something cheaper online for a rain barrel kit, but what might happen with that is that it doesn't have all the components that I'll be showing you. So before you go and buy a different kit, let me just show you all the components that you'll need. And then you'll need a way to get the water out. So you'll need the barrel, you'll need the adapter components to connect it to your downspout. Then you'll need a way to get the water out of the barrel. That can be a watering can, that can be a hose, but I just put a watering can just to give you a rough estimate. So we're looking at between $52 and $72, depending on where you choose to get your barrel. Here are all, again, the materials that you will need. Some of the diverter kits, like I was mentioning, are cheaper because they don't have the hole bits that you will need to drill in those spigot hole and the intake hole. You'll need a drill, gloves, because you'll be working with metal. Definitely eye protection, a level to make sure that your connection hose is level, tape measure, pencil, and a wrench. One of the questions I get asked sometimes is, can people want to upcycle, which I'm very happy that they want to do that, but asking, can you use something else other than plastic for your rain barrels? And really, plastic works best. You can use metal, but here is kind of the issue with it. Obviously, it'll rust and you will start to get holes in your metal. So it is possible, but what you have to do is you have to go buy basically plastic paint. It's a paint that you put on that's a plastic coating. It's an expensive paint, and you have to coat the entire inside and the entire outside in order to make that metal barrel to prevent it from rusting. So really, when you add up all those costs, it was probably cheaper and more effective to get the plastic barrel in the first place. So even though it's possible, I would recommend just going with plastic. You can get, there's really two types that you'll see out there of rain barrels. You can get ones with the screw caps, as you can see here on the left, or ones that open completely. And both are great as long as they're both plastic, but both of those barrels are great. Typically, the type that opens up the complete way are more expensive. And again, your upcycled barrels may need some additional cleaning. The ones that I got from the container reclaimer in Longmont had soy sauce in them, but I will be giving you a recipe later on for how to clean them out. Those took some cleaning, and it's 55 gallons of soy sauce. That's a lot of soy sauce. So, you might be going on an adventure of what was stored in those barrels if you decide to upcycle them. The diverter that I recommend, I've always like to talk about the pros and cons of them. The pro is that it is very easy to install. You don't have to remove the downspout to install it. You don't have to cut your downspout off. And it's just drilling into the existing downspout. It is cost effective, and the kits include the hole saws and spigots. The cons are you are unable to see any clogs. I'll be showing you at the very end, I'll be unsharing my screen and then going into detail about all the components. So I'll show you the diverter, but since the diverter is inside your downspout, you can't see the clogs, and it has a small opening in the center, so there is the potential for large materials to clog it. But what's great about this one is that I'll show you the signs to look for, and if you see that happening, you just unscrew it, remove your diverter, clean it, and put it back in. So it's not difficult to clean or fix. I'll pause here for some questions before we get into how exactly to install your rain barrel.
Yeah, great. So we have a question kind of going back to more of the legal law side of rainwater harvesting. Again, not sure your insight on it, but do you know if there is kind of a difference between harvesting if you live in city limits or if you live in unincorporated areas, or is it kind of all Colorado statewide?
So it's all Colorado statewide, has the same restrictions, but if you have a well on your house, then it's different rules. So you can potentially, if you have your own well, then you can potentially collect. There might not be any restrictions on the amount of water that you can collect, and you can use it for the same uses as your well if it's outdoor. So, if you do, usually the mountain, in the mountain areas, people have wells, and so they are able to collect a lot more water. So if you have specific questions about wells, let me know and I can direct you to some resources to figure out what uses your well is for, and then potentially how you can go about collecting a lot more water.
Great. Yeah, that would be awesome. You briefly touched on this, and I think you kind of answered this question, but I just want to be sure. Somebody was collecting rain in giant barrels, and algae did begin to grow. Is that likely because of sunlight not having kind of a lid on it?
Yes, and I'll be touching on that too, because that is a very common question. But if you don't have a lid, yes, the water can get, the sunlight contacts the water and creates that algae. Also, if your barrel is white, kind of the same thing, you're letting sunlight into the water. And so that's how algae typically grows. And then I also have some best practices for keeping your barrel cleaner to help prevent some of that algae growth. But it's not that big of a deal if you do have algae growing in it. You can still use that water, clean it a little bit, clean the barrel after you use all the water, and then hook it back up, and you won't have it. It's still okay. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do have algae growing. It's okay.
Great. Yeah, and I did want to mention that we do sometimes have rain barrels at reuse facility. If you're familiar with Resource Central, that's 6400 Arapahoe in Boulder. I have no idea, if we would have all of the parts to actually make it a functioning rain barrel kit, but I have seen rain barrels there, and they'll specifically say, it had Sprite concentrate in it, a lot of Coca-Cola kind of barrels. So that's a place to look. But again, you got, all the other pieces that kind of make it work as a full kit. So let's kind of get into it a little bit. I know we have a lot of questions, but again, I think you're going to cover them and answer them. So let's keep going.
Okay, great. Okay, how to install. All right, first thing you need to do is pick a location. So walk around your home and look at all of your downspout locations. These are all the potential locations for your rain barrels. What you need to keep in mind is when you're choosing a location is proximity or closeness to where you need the water. So you might have a perfect location for your or for your rain barrel, but what you want to actually water is all the way on the other side of the house. And so that might be a question to ask yourself, am I really going to do all of these trips around my house to water my garden? And the answer is probably no. So that rain barrel is probably going to just sit there. So proximity to where you need the water is really important. How easy is it going to be to make a level base in that area? Your rain barrel needs to sit on a base. And then the catchment area, or the amount of water that you will be able to collect from that roof line. So for example, keep going in and out of my laser pointer. So originally I had been thinking, this is my house, of putting my rain barrel in 2 different locations. The number 1 is where I had originally been wanting to put it because it was really close to a native garden that I was going to be putting in. I wanted to use my rain barrel for establishing that native garden. But then I pulled up my house, the Google view of it, and I saw how small that roof line was that was going to be collecting for that particular downspout location. So when I was looking at this, I also saw the number 2 downspout was still really close to where I wanted to plant my garden, and it was substantially larger catchment area. So I wanted to give this resource to all of you because it's really easy to do this visually. So Google your address to figure out your catchment area, Google your address, then click satellite view. It's usually in the lower left-hand corner. Right click and a box will come up that will say that you can select different options. And one of the options is measure distance. What will come up is these little circles right here. And you can put them in the 4 corners of the roof line that goes to that particular downspout, and then it'll give you the square feet. So if you'd like to know exactly how many gallons you can collect from that particular roof line like me, here is the calculation. So you take your catchment area in square feet, multiply that by your rainfall in feet. We talked about inches last time, and multiply that by 7.48 gallons. And then you get the total rainwater in gallons. So it's 1.33 feet is the conversion of 16 inches of water. And this is the example of my particular roof line. So it's 710 square feet. Now, when you're using this tool in Google Maps, you have to be sure to cross over your points. It'll make sense when you're looking at it. But sometimes if you just have the circles close but not quite touching, it'll only give you the feet. So you have to cross over those two circles for it to give you square feet when you make a square. The other way to just do this is visually. You don't have to do the calculation. You can just look at it visually and see which roof lines are larger, how much I'll be able to collect more water here than over there. You know, for example, the 1 or the 2. Next, and when you're choosing a location, don't forget your other roofs. So we have a loafing shed, which I didn't know what that was until we moved here, but it is storage for like animals or hay, an area to get out of the weather. And so this area I really liked because it was higher than my garden, which was over here, uphill of my garden. And so we didn't have gutters on here. So I called that gutter company that I'll be recommending to you. And they came and installed gutters on my loafing shed. I was so excited about getting gutters on my loafing shed. I think I scared them a little bit because normally people aren't as excited as I am to get gutters. But I just really wanted that location for my rain barrel since it was right next to my garden and all of my other downspouts are very far from there. So just think about, even if you don't have gutters on the location that might be perfect for your rain barrel, you can add them to your other structures. Next, create a base. So rain barrels are very heavy. They will be about 500 pounds when full. So always supervise your kids around them and create a very level base so that they don't fall off when they're full. The other reason that you want to create a base is because you're creating water pressure. Rain barrel or rainwater doesn't have water pressure. So when you go and you turn on your hose, you always have water pressure. But that's just not the case with a rain barrel. So as you elevate your barrel, you're creating water pressure. That's why all of the water tanks that you see in towns, the water towers are all elevated because that is creating that water pressure. So you need to select a flat location for the barrel within 3 feet of a downspout. It needs to be within 3 feet because that is the length of hose that you will be getting in your kit. And then again, choose a downspout that collects water from a larger section of roof. Place the barrel close to where you want to be watering. For the base construction, you can purchase a rain barrel stand, but some of the stands that I've seen look like a stool. They have kind of 3 legs to them. I wouldn't get that kind because those to me aren't stable, especially on soil, because you'll get that soil movement even if you create that base and you pack it down. So my favorite is actually cinder blocks, which are pictured here on the right, because they're all the same size. I have found that it takes 6 cinder blocks to make a base for a 55-gallon rain barrel, and they're cheap, they're available, and if you don't like the look of them, you can always add a paver. They have kind of nicer looking paver stones that are the same height as a cinder block, and you can just glue those to your base to kind of make it more fancy, or you could paint it or whatever. The other reason to elevate your rain barrel is because so that you can put something underneath it. It's hard to see, but I put the spigot there in this picture, and there is about 1 inch, maybe 2 inches of space to be able to put that spigot on there. So I wouldn't be able to put a watering can or even attach a hose if I did not elevate the rain barrel first. Additionally, when you're thinking about the height of your base, think about what you want to put under there. So if you want to use a 5-gallon bucket, then you might want to have a taller base. If you're thinking of just using a watering can, then these cinder blocks are, and I cannot think of the exact height of a cinder block, but a watering can that's a regular size will fit under there. I know there's really big watering cans, so those might not fit, but just kind of a standard watering can will fit. And you can also put your hose onto it easily with that cinder block height. Other substances that you can use or other materials, you can use bricks or even extra patio pavers. But with bricks, just a caution, I would say again, is just making sure that it's really well constructed and that it's even, because those barrels are extremely heavy. And if your base is not constructed, it's not structurally sound, that the whole thing can fall over, which will rip off your downspout from your house potentially, and it could fall on a number of things and just cause damage. So just want to be sure that that is structurally sound. Next is drill a spigot hole into your barrel. Yes, that is me. That was my first rain barrel that I ever drilled into. I am not what you would call handy, so I was nervous about drilling into it, but if I can do it, you can do it. So one of my tips is sitting on the barrel, because it gives you greater control. It won't move around as much on you if you sit on it. Then measure 3 inches up from the bottom of the barrel and make a mark. Carefully drill the spigot hole using the smallest hole saw. So what I'm describing here for you is these are the directions for installing the kit from Colorado Raincatcher. If you use a different kit, then you'll need to follow those instructions. And what I'm going to also be describing is how to do a DIY rain barrel. Some of the rain barrels that you could purchase, the fancy ones, already have these installed for you. So you would not need to do this in some cases. So kind of back to the DIY. I love doing DIY, and so I want to share that with you. Carefully drill the spigot hole using the smallest hole saw. There are 3 hole saws. You want to be sure you're using the correct hole saw for the correct gasket, because if you use a gasket that's too large, it will leak. So check and double check that you're using the correct gasket size. For this one, I recommend that you drill it and install the gasket immediately afterwards. If it's hard to get in, you can put soap around the outside of the gasket and kind of get it in there. You want to, and then push it in. You want to install it right after you drill, because the metal or the plastic will still be a little bit warm. So it'll be easier to put that gasket into your barrel when it's a little bit warm and with that soap. You want to wait to screw on your spigot until after you've already inserted the gasket into the barrel. If you try to install the spigot, put that into your gasket, and then put it into your barrel, it's not going to work. So drill your spigot hole, install your gasket, and then screw on your spigot. Make sure the spigot is closed after you finish your installation. You might be thinking right now, well, obviously, why would I leave it open? But for the type of spigot that I'll be showing you, it typically is a T. So when you're looking at it and it's in a T form, then that means it's closed. If it's in line with the spigot, it is open. So last year I was installing my barrel on the uphill side of my rain garden. It was about to rain, so I was kind of rushed. I was taking a bunch of pictures because I was teaching a class about it. And so I installed my barrel, I got it in there. I took a picture of the spigot closed, this picture, and then I ran inside and I had messed with it, I guess, again. And I ran inside, it rained, I went outside, and I had left the spigot open, and I was so mad. And so I don't want that to happen to you. So double check that your spigot is closed before you go inside and before it rains. Next, you'll need to drill an intake hole or a fill hole. This is the hole where the water will be coming into your barrel. You need to consider where you'll be putting the barrel before you drill that hole, because it needs to be on the same side as your downspout. This is a picture of me drilling the spigot hole. That's at the bottom again, but it's the same process. You just need to figure out where you're going to be placing your spigot hole. The reason that you need to have it on the same size as your downspout is because that fill hose is only 3 feet long, and it's not long enough to go from your downspout all the way around the rain barrel. So it needs to be the same side as your downspout. Still want to mark 3 inches down from the top of the barrel. Use the medium hole saw, and then carefully drill the hole centered on the mark and insert the small rubber fitting. This fitting for the intake hole is easier to put in. It's just a little bit more flexible, but still you can use that soap if it's difficult for whatever reason. And I'd recommend doing it again, just right after you drill your hole. The reason why I say 3 inches from the top and bottom, that really is to maximize the amount of water you're able to use. We don't want it to be right at the bottom. You know, why couldn't you maybe elevate your rain barrel and then put it directly at the bottom? So because it is 3 inches from the bottom, you still will get a little bit of sediment at the bottom, but that'll be easy enough to clean out after the fact, you know, when you're doing your maintenance. But this is really, that's the best placement for that spigot to maximize the amount of water, but also having room to put it on the barrel since it is sloped. Next is your diverter. The diverter, this is where you're going to cut into metal for the first time. And so you'll need eye protection and gloves because, you know, I just don't want anyone to get injured. So please be sure to wear those. You'll want to have the intake hole already drilled. You'll put the connection hose on there, and then you need to make sure it is level. That's how you select the location for your diverter. It has to be level with the intake hole because this is what allows the water to come into your barrel. Into your barrel and out of your barrel. If your diverter hole is higher than your intake hole, then your barrel will still fill up with water. But once that barrel is filled up, it will not be able to go out and do the overflow correctly. So the water will come out the top of your barrel. And so then that water will be going directly onto your foundation and causing you all sorts of issues. So that is why it needs to, and then if you install your spigot too lower than your intake hole, water does not go uphill, and so your barrel will not fill. So that is why it is really important that you need to have your intake hole and your diverter installed level. When you're drilling into the metal, you use your largest hole saw. Also measure your downspout because your downspout could be a 2x3 or a 3x4. 3x4 is typically a commercial downspout. We do have one on our house as a 3x4, but typically you'll find that you have 2x3. The side that you need to drill your diverter into is the 3-inch side. So that's why it's important to measure and be sure which side you're drilling into and what size your downspout is. The diverters that come with the kits that I'm recommending can be used for either size of your of those downspouts. But I actually recommend, and I'll show you an example of this, but I actually recommend if you have a 3x4, purchasing a larger diverter from Blue Barrel because it'll maximize the amount of water that you can get. But again, I'll show you that example and why I recommend that during the kind of show and tell portion of today. Place your barrel on the stand with the spigot facing out. Again, you want to be able to access that spigot. So if you accidentally start installing your barrel backwards, then you won't be able to get the spigot. So make sure that the spigot's facing out, that you have a level, and that you use the largest hole saw to drill into the 3-inch side of the downspout. Pressure is needed to drill through your metal, and make sure you're holding the hole saw straight. So I've done this enough times that I have, been putting pressure and didn't even know on one more side or one particular side than the other side. So just be sure that it's straight so that you get equal pressure all the way around. That piece of metal will come out, as you can see on the picture below. So I have seen some downspouts that go into the ground. So if that's the case for you, with certain houses, that's how they were designed. The stormwater just goes underneath the ground. You're going to need to capture that little circle of metal, or that will go into the ground, and you're going to have to fish it out at some point. So just a note for that, just look at what type of downspout you have and where it comes out. I have had some cases where I drill and the metal stays on the drill. And then I have other cases where the metal circle fell down the downspout, and I could get it because the downspout didn't go into the ground. Here is what the diverter looks like. I definitely recommend putting some soap on the outside of the diverter because it is a little bit difficult to insert into the hole that you've made with your hole saw. So you need to squeeze it, as in the second picture, second top picture. Make sure that the cup and arrow is up as pictured on the top right, and then insert it into the hole. You need to make sure that the diverter is completely flush against your downspout. It'll look that way when you put it in the first time, but there's actually a little bit of a lip on that diverter. And so you need to kind of give it one more push and you'll hear a pop. And that's how you know that it is inserted correctly. And then you'll receive 2 little screws, and it just takes 2 screws to hold that diverter on there. Then you connect the fill tube from the intake hole to the diverter hole, and that your barrel is set up. Then test your system. The way that I do this is just by taking a hose and watering the top of the roof line where the gutter is connected to that particular downspout, just to make sure that it's working correctly. You can see any issues that you have with it. And so that's how I recommend testing the system. Obviously, this picture on the left is of a barrel where the lid could come completely off. But if you have barrels that have the 2 screw caps, you can take off one of the caps, use a flashlight and look in there, and you can also just hear it. It makes the water going into the barrel makes a sound, and you'll be able to tell if it's working just from sound alone. But I like to have eyes on it and visually see it working as well. So that's how you do it. Just use a flashlight in one of the holes. Here are some issues that I encountered and wanted to share with you so that you don't have these issues as well. So the first rain barrel that I installed, I used a different diverter. So this system right here, these are actually not being sold anymore. There were issues with them, but so I installed the barrel. I thought I was doing it correctly and didn't. So I installed the hose too low, as you can see. If we were in person, I would do a pop quiz and say, who remembers what happens when you install it too low? But since obviously I can't do that. So what was happening is that my rain barrel was filling up with water, no problem. And then it was overflowing right next to the house, which is not good. So what I had to do was add wood over here to raise the height of the rain barrel, because I had cut this particular diverter system. I actually had to cut the downspout and then insert it into the whole line of the downspout. So I couldn't move the diverter. So I had to raise the level of the rain barrel with some additional wood, and it wasn't quite perfect. So I had to hang something on there to add some additional weight so that when it would overflow, it would go back down the downspout correctly. So don't let that happen to you, so that you have to make adjustments after the fact. You can do it right the first time by following the steps that I've laid out for you. This is not my roof, but it very well could be. We have pine trees that overhang our house. So if you see this happening, you need to clean out your gutter. The way that you know your gutter is clogged is if you see this. If you see water just shooting over your gutter, then your gutter is clogged. So that could be an indication that, one, you need to clean out your gutters, that you didn't clean them out before you installed your rain barrel. Or if you did clean them out before you installed your rain barrel, then there might be a clog in your diverter. So that would be a sign that you need to just go check your diverter. You can just take it out, make sure that it's clear, and put it back in. So these are just one of the warning signs to look for. The bottom right photo is of my rain barrel that just got kind of gross. And that might happen to yours as well. You know, you might have algae in it, or you just might get, if you have a rain barrel hooked up under where you have a lot of particulates, like in my case, I have my trees. So there's more stuff going into the barrel, even though the diverter will help that. The diverter will allow larger debris to go through the middle, but there's still the pollen that will still most likely go into your rain barrel. So you'll get that sediment and other things into your rain barrel potentially, depending on what you have overhanging your roof line, or how much pollen or dust or ash are just on your roof in general. So if this happens to you, in this case, there was just a smell in the water. So I used all the water because there was nothing wrong with the water on the plants. The smell does not stay once you use it. And then I cleaned it out and hooked it back up, and then I didn't have any issues with it the rest of the season. So if that happens to you, it's not a big deal. You know how to fix it. So what if you have two barrels that you want to install in the same location? So since you have the opportunity to install two barrels, you could either install them in the same place or greater storage, or put two different ones in two different locations, depending on what your needs are. If you would like to connect them together for greater storage, there's a couple, it's very similar to how you did just one, but there's a couple of things to consider. So there are connector kits available from Colorado Raincatcher, also from Blue Barrel. And what you will need is a connector pipe right here. And then you will need an additional seal, an additional intake seal. So what you need to do is you need to do the drilling the same way as you did before. So you have the intake hole, you have the downspout hole that you drilled in there. In the downspout, you have your connection hose. You have to drill your spigot hole on both barrels, but then you'll have an additional intake hole on your first barrel. And then when you're putting these two together, the intake hole, your second one, has to be lower than the number one, because if you have a higher, the intake and the hose connecting the two rain barrels, if it's higher than the intake hole you're getting from the downspout, then the second barrel will never fill. So it has to be lower than the initial intake hole, and this has to be level. Again, same reasoning. Once your barrel fills up, it has to have a way to go to let the overflow go back down the downspout like normal. So that is how the two connect and allow for that greater storage. I will be talking about this issue here a little bit later. I'll be showing you how exactly that works. So in this particular picture, the connection hose is completely maxed out at that 3 feet. Even though the hose goes that far, I would not recommend using it that far because it is no longer firm. So when water enters in the hose, it'll sag. And so water will not be able to fill into your barrel. So using a smaller hose run is much better because it provides that stability that is needed for the water to be able to go into your barrel. So putting your barrel as close to your downspout as possible is really the best way to do that. When you winterize it, don't let this happen to you. Don't let bad barrels to happen to good people. You need to empty your barrel. This particular picture is showing someone that just cut their downspout and then let the water run into their barrel. It has a screen on top. You know, we'll see more algae growth with that screen. And you'll just have issues with winterizing it because your barrel will freeze, or you have to move your barrel and all of that water will go right down your house and then freeze on your foundation area. Additionally, in this picture, there's another issue. You can see right here the overflow. And the overflow is also not going into a great place. It's going right next to the house. So if you end up purchasing a rain barrel that's fancier and it might have an overflow, if you need to make sure that water is going away from the house and going into a location that you want it to go. So for winterizing, you need to empty your barrel, remove any tubing, remove all the tubing rather, rinse out any debris, remove your diverter and place the winterization cap, which I'll be showing you. In the directions that you receive, sometimes they say that you can just turn your diverter over and leave it in place, but I don't recommend doing that because it still has a pretty small hole. And with the amount of ice and thaw that we get, I think that you'll just end up with a clogged system. So I recommend just taking it out completely and placing your winterization cap. You can either leave the barrel in place or store it for the winter. I actually see a question coming in that I'd like to answer. So the question is, you cannot harvest water from snowmelt in the winter. And that's a great question. So the reason why you don't need to do that is because there's nothing growing in the winter. I know that we do winter watering sometimes, but it's more of a risk of bursting your barrel than it would be the brief amount of winter watering that you need to do, which is like once a month. So it's still recommended that you don't collect the runoff from the snowmelt and instead wait to hook it up in the spring. The maintenance for it, in the larger systems where you have a cistern, and these are like 2,000 gallon cisterns, the best practice is to have what's called a first flush. And that is usually a PVC pipe that collects the first water that comes off after the first spring rain. And that first spring rain is dirty. It has it has like bird droppings on it. It can have pollen and dust and ash, like I was mentioning, and dirt and leaves. And so the whole idea is that when the first flush happens, that it's collecting that dirty water, and then the cleaner water can go into your cistern. So obviously this is a rain barrel and not a cistern. It doesn't make sense to install this really complicated first flush system. But the way that you can get that same effect of getting the cleaner water is just waiting to hook up your barrel until after the first rain of the season, which we just had. So now you are ready to go right after this class to set up your barrel. But next spring, just wait till that first rain of the season before you hook up your barrel, because that will clean off your roof and allow the water going into your barrel to be cleaner. Make sure you clean out your gutters in the spring before connecting your barrel, because all of that stuff that's accumulated will go into your barrel. If you're having a lot of issues with a lot of different debris getting into your gutters, you can get gutter covers. It can help. It's optional. It's not something that you need. If you are getting a rain barrel, it's by no means required. And they can be pricey. Rinse out your barrel to prevent algae blooms. And then this seems obvious, but use the water in your barrel. The whole purpose of a rain barrel is to use it on your landscape and not to just store it. So if the longer you keep water in your barrel, the longer you have the potential for getting algae or having the, like a smell develop in your barrel. But if you're using your barrel consistently, the water in your barrel consistently, then you're less likely to have these issues. And you're just able to just save, so much more water by actually using the water in your barrel rather than having it full for the next rain. Okay. The question that just came through that I saw is, when in spring can you put it out, and when in fall should you remove it? So again, after the first spring rain is when you can hook up your barrel. I recommend waiting till close to our last freeze date, which is Mother's Day. But just look, those spring storms can really vary. Obviously in Colorado, it has been some crazy weather that we've gotten this spring. I would wait until it's rain and for sure not going to snow again before putting it out. And then in the fall, last fall, we had that winter storm, the snow in September, but I left my barrel up until October. I really like to leave mine up until we have that really hard frost, that hard freeze, when you start putting away your veggie garden, all of that. So at the same time that you're doing your maintenance on your vegetable garden or you're blowing on your sprinklers, that's the same time that you'll be putting away your rain barrels. Cleaning your barrel. Okay, here is kind of the little recipe for cleaning your barrel. Disconnect your barrel from your house. It's much easier to move around that way. You can rinse the barrel out with your hose. Get a long-handed kind of scrubber This is again picturing one where the lid comes all the way off, but you can still use that scrubber when you have the two separate openings. And what I do with the ones that have just the two openings with the screw caps is I pour in the cleaning product, the baking soda, the white vinegar, and then I turn the barrel on its side and just swish it. And so that really cleans out the barrel. You might need to do it more than once if you have a lot of buildup in there, but that has really been typically working really well for the folks that I have suggested that to, and for myself, and then just rinse out the barrel and it's ready to go for the next spring. One of the questions that came through earlier was, will collecting water off an asphalt roof leach pollutants? And the short answer is yes, it will. There will, when water hits that roof line, there are chemicals in asphalt shingles, and it will leach some of those chemicals into the rainwater. But there was this wonderful study that was done, and it's linked here for you, where I really need to know which institution did this, but one of the university took a lot of different types of roof material. So they used asphalt shingles, they used metal roofs, they used, there's the composite, they used a bunch of different types, and then they hyper polluted it. So they made it way more polluted than we would typically have on our own homes. And then they put rainwater on it. And then they tested that water. And so they found there were heavy metals, there was, just different types of contaminants in there. But then they put it on a vegetable garden. And what they found is that the soil would clean out all of those contaminants. And so the vegetables were then tested and they did not have any contaminants in them. And so my caveat to that, so it is safe to use rainwater on your garden. Best practices are, if you're watering your tomato plants, then water them at the base of the plant instead of, having your watering can and watering all of the tomato fruit that you'll be eating. I wouldn't recommend using it on your lettuce, or if you're growing spinach, or I use a salad mix that I also grow. Don't use it on your leafy greens, because that water, it's really hard to get that water right on the root, and you're ending up watering the vegetable part, the leaf that you will actually be eating. And so just to be on the safe side, use tap water for that instead of rainwater, just because you'd have to wash those leafy greens vigorously to make sure there's no contaminants on there. But as long as it's not the leafy greens, the rest is really safe to use. So on even your carrots, your potatoes, even though those are root vegetables and you'll be eating those, the soil still filters out those pollutants and you won't have that issue of contaminants inside them. So rainwater is great to use on your vegetable gardens, just not on your leafy greens. Will algae grow in your barrel? It might. It sounds like Jess was saying that Resource Central has some from Coca-Cola. The ones that are typically from Coca-Cola are white. So you have to paint your barrel if it is white. You want it to be a darker color. So you can't, it doesn't have to be darker. You can spray paint it with a primer and then spray paint it, or then paint it a dark color and then paint it a lighter color. So the darker color is only to help keep the algae out. But if the algae does grow in your barrel, again, just use that water, empty it out, and then clean it with your recipe that I gave you, and then you can hook it back up and it'll be fine. Can mosquitoes still get in your barrel? I learned a lot about mosquitoes recently, that they can survive in like the little amount of water that just sits down in your gutters in between rainstorms. And then they could lay their eggs and that could wash into your barrel. It is less likely that you will have them wash into your barrel because you have that diverter. So it's already cleaning out some of the particulates that are on your roof. But if a mosquito larvae does happen to get into your barrel, and you see that there's an issue, then there's something called the mosquito dunk that is linked here, which is harmless to pollinators, wildlife, and safe on plants. It's basically a something that just eats it's a biological thing, and so it eats the larvae, and so it's harmless. But you can get those. They look like little flat donuts that are brown, and you can utilize those to get rid of your mosquito problem. Okay, decorating your barrel. Decorate your barrel before you install it, or remove the rain barrel from your house before decorating. So the paint that I recommend does not come off. So you want to be sure that you're not spray painting your house, unless you don't mind that you're spray painting your house. The first thing to do is to use sandpaper, 100 weight, just very lightly sand your barrel, and then wipe it down, allow it to dry. The reason you're doing that is because it's adding a little bit of texture to your barrel so that the primer will stick to it. And then you need a spray plastic paint primer before you do your other paint. If you don't do this step, then the paint will not stick. But it's a really quick dry time. And my favorite one is pictured here. It's the Rust-Oleum primer. It comes in 2 different colors, or it did the last time I checked. It came in white and gray. And then after you use the primer, then you can create your own design. You could paint it with a different color. There's cardboard stencils that you can make of your own, or you can buy decals. And if you do artistic barrels, if you're artistically inclined, I am not, but if you are, be sure to spray the final product with a paint sealer when you're done to protect that. These are some inspiring pictures that I found when I was thinking of different ideas for designing your barrel if you don't want it to be white or blue. I like this one right here because it incorporated that blue color into the design. So what you would do for this one is you would use your stencil and then just spray paint the primer on your stencil and then paint the artistic, or then do like the final painting over it. So you don't have to spray paint your entire barrel with primer if you're not going to paint your entire barrel. And then I liked, this is more my speed here with the handprints. For my kids, we actually spray painted the primer on and then used a blackboard paint so that they could do chalk on it. And so whenever it rains, it gets cleaned off and they get to decorate it over and over again. So that's worked really well for us and we like that. But if you are artistically inclined and need some inspiration, I always go to Pinterest for my inspiration. And I thought this one was really neat because it incorporated the design across multiple barrels. I mean, brilliant. I love that. Okay, so one of the other things that questions that I get sometimes is, well, 55 gallons, that's not very much water. Am I really making a difference by having a rain barrel? And so I just wanted to show you, this is similar to the impact and of the lawn watering. But today, we had 205 webinar registrants. If everyone got 1 barrel, then that's saving, and filled it 1 time through the whole season, that's saving over 11,000 gallons of water. If everyone got 2 barrels and filled it 1 time, that's saving over 22,000 gallons. So I think we could all agree that we can all fill our rain barrel 1 time. So what about 6 times? Okay, so now we're looking at if everyone got 1 rain barrel and filled it 6 times, over 67,000 gallons. And then if you fill it, if you get 2 barrels and fill it 6 times, then we're over 135,000 gallons. So this is a substantial amount of water saved collectively. And if everyone does this and everyone saves a little bit of water, then we're talking about a big water savings. And so you might be wondering, well, is it realistic to talk about saving or filling your rain barrel 6 times? Yes, it is. Last year, I counted. And even though this little picture says 8 times, I actually filled my rain barrel 11 times in 2020. And so I saved 605 gallons and utilized that rainwater on my plants. So together, if we make small changes in our landscapes, we can save thousands of gallons of water, build sustainable communities, and ensure that we have water for future generations. Okay, now I'm going to go on a tangent about native plants, so stay with me. If you're interested in native plants have a whole variety of benefits. I know that Resource Central was distributing a native plant garden in a box this year, which is fantastic. And so if you're interested in learning more, CSU currently has a native plant research opportunity where if you sign up for a webinar, you learn about native plants, and then you receive vouchers to purchase native plants for you and your friends. So it's all about encouraging the individual, you as the individual to plant more native plants, but then also to get more community around native plants. So I attended that workshop and I found it valuable, and they distributed a lot of different resources afterwards, and you'd be really helping out the plant research, the native plant research that they're doing. This link will take you to the remaining webinar dates that are left. I believe there are 4. Additionally, if you're looking for some plant sales, the High Plains Environmental Center in Loveland has an online plant sale. They are open and they focus exclusively on natives. The Gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins, I know that we have people from all over Colorado attending today. The Gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins has their plant sale from today through the 21st. Today and tomorrow are only for members, but then it opens to the general public on May 6th, and they have a lot of natives that they had been focusing on this year. Harlequin Gardens in Boulder, I've heard nothing but good things about them. They have a large native plant section. And then I recently heard about Nick's Garden Center in Aurora, and they actually have a really cool section of their website that is a plant finder. And they have a button that you can select for native plants. And I went through that and I saw that it wasn't exact. But if you do their xeric plants and their native plants, then there's some crossover between both of them. So the native plants are a little bit mixed into both of those, but I still thought it was a really neat tool that they provided so that you could see pictures and find out more about water requirements and shade or full sun requirements. So that might be a good tool to utilize for you. Of course, call your local nurseries about their native plant selection, and then some other resources for you about native perennials or overview of native plants, or the Native Plant Society is there as well. And here I also provided some additional resources. There's a really quick rain barrel installation video. When I say quick, it's 45 seconds. It does not take 45 seconds to install a rain barrel, especially if you need to build a base. But if you want to see someone doing it live, that video is there for you. And then I also included the book that I recommended, the Rainwater Harvesting for Drylands and Beyond. And then what I also included the link for Resource Central to see what programs you qualify for based on your water provider. I had been asked in a previous class about a gutter screen or a gutter strainer. So this is something that you could put at the top of your downspout where the gutter and the downspout connect on the downspout that you have your rain barrel. So people are wondering about ways to keep extra debris out of their rain barrel, and that is one way that you can do it. But just know you'll need to clean that off. So it's not just a install it and leave it. You'll start getting clogged gutters because those screens will have small holes, and most likely you will have them clogged. So if you're interested in that, definitely you can look into it. I did link the gutter strainers that I found there, but just know that there is extra maintenance involved with that. Okay, I want to start with questions, and then I will also do my show and tell.
Great. Yeah. So we have a solid amount of questions kind of over everything that we just covered in this last section, but you have answered a lot of them. So let me just sort through and make sure that I am good. So one right off the top is, how many times do you need to clean your rain barrel during the season? Is this something that you should be doing, once when you're kind of putting it away, or maybe every month? What's kind of your timeline with it?
So I'm all about ease and simplicity. So best practice is probably after, if there's been a substantial amount of time between rains. Practically, I clean my rain barrel when I see there's an issue, or at the end of the season, or when I was reinstalling my rain barrel, even though they were cleaned, they were sitting out, and so then I was like, okay, I cleaned them again before I installed them. So even though the best thing to do, if you're following like all the best practices, might be to clean them more regularly throughout the season, I just don't think that it's really necessary, and the water that you get is still great. So definitely when you put it away for the springtime and before you do your first installation, if you got it used.
Great. And we do have a few questions about where do you pour out the water? If there's nothing great in there and you put all those cleaning products in, what's the best disposal method for that?
Okay. Put more water in there. So a lot of the times, what I heard when I was a kid, the solution to pollution is dilution. So adding more water in there to dilute those chemicals. The vinegar, if you have a patch of weeds that are stubborn, you can pour them on that section. Maybe not around your lawn in case you have any issues with like it killing some of your grass, although I find it very difficult to kill grass. So I really think that it would be okay to pour that in like an area that has, maybe just some dirt. Try not to pour it directly into your gutters, like your curbside where your stormwater goes. I wouldn't quite recommend that, but I think pour it out onto the ground where you don't mind if it kills some grass. That's what I do with mine.
Great.
Or weeds rather, not grass.
Yes. Yeah. No, that sounds great. Cool. Okay. What about securing your rain barrel if there's high winds or, adverse weather? Kind of what's the best way of not having it blow away and rip off your downspout?
Yes. So if it's full, it will not move. But if it's not full, there are some like straps that you can get to like secure it more, or you can brace it with, depending on where the wind is coming from, just try to brace it with like, I built up more of the, I had like some bricks and some concrete pavers that I put on the side to keep it in place when the wind was blowing from the west. So a couple of different suggestions. I would just say if you're drilling into your house, just make sure to put those straps on. I kind of stay away from that just because I don't like drilling into my house. So if there are other straps that you can use that you don't have to drill, or ways that you could connect it that don't require that, then I would recommend that, just so I'm not the one saying, definitely drill into your siding, no problem.
Absolutely. Great. Okay. Well, I think that's the bulk of our questions. If you kind of want to show off some of the pieces of a rain barrel, I will make sure that you are front and center.
Okay. So I have my handy dandy light here. So what I want to show you is how to install your what the diverter looks like on the inside, because I know that was one of my questions. Here's what the diverter will look like on the outside. This is a 3 by 2 inch downspout. So this is what it looks like in the inside. You can see that the downspout goes all of the edges of the gutter, or downspout rather, and then it has that hole in the middle for the debris to go through. So this is, again, the 3 inch side by the 2 inch side. So you always want to drill into the 3 inch side. So now you're wondering, oh my gosh, what if I do it wrong? What will happen? Great question. So here is what the downspout will look like if you drill into the 2 inch side. So you can see that there is some extra room right here. The diverter there's past the 2 inch side. And this is what it looks like in the middle. I'm trying to get this to Okay, so you can see it's just kind of squished in there, and there's a gap at the back. So you will still be able to collect water if you completely install it incorrectly, or on the wrong side rather. So, you know, the diverter part in the middle will still collect water. You just won't be able to collect the maximum amount of water that you could have if you installed it on the 3-inch side. This is also what happens if you have a commercial size gutter, the 3x4, and you install this size downspout. There will be that gap at the back. So that's why I recommend, if you have that commercial size downspout, that you get the diverter from Blue Barrel, because they sell these. That is a 3x4 diverter, because it'll maximize that entire section for you. Again, if you have a 3x4, you will actually be installing it on the side of it, because the 4 side will be the longer side. So that's what it looks like on the inside. The kit from Colorado Raincatcher has these different components. So it has 3 different hole saws. Let's try and hold them up all at the same time. There we go. 3 different hole saws. So that's why I was saying, make sure that you have the correct hole saw with the correct gasket. So the one that looks like a raindrop, here we go. I like it because it looks like a raindrop. I've had people ask me before, does it matter if you install it like this or like this or like this? It doesn't matter. There's no difference on the other side of it. This, I like it because it's a raindrop. So that's the way I installed mine, but there's really no functional difference if you install it differently. So with the spigot, this is the spigot gasket. If you use the middle hole saw for this spigot gasket, it will leak because it's not the correct size. So just be sure, and you can kind of check by holding them up together to make sure that the correct size for the correct spigot. And this is the middle hole saw goes to the middle gasket. This is the intake gasket. And this is what connects to your hose, your fill hose. The fill hose will go there, and your diverter will go there. So this is the size of your diverter. I know it can be kind of hard to see in this kind of presentation, but you want to be sure that the arrow and cup is up. There is the hole that where the debris will come through, and there is a little lip here. As you can see, that's how the water will get into your barrel. So I've had some people ask me, well, since there's a hole in the middle, how will the barrel fill up? And that is because when water comes into your downspout, it is spiraling usually. And so that's why it's along the sides of the downspout. And so that's why these this diverter will collect that water and move it into your barrel. But in the really large rain events, you might not, the water will probably then be going down the center. But in those cases, you probably will already have had your rain barrel fill up too. It doesn't take much for your rain barrel to fill up, especially because it's 55 gallons. Okay, so you install your diverter into your downspout like so. In the winter time, you would remove this whole thing. You do need to squeeze it. I actually kind of found it's easier to get it out if you turn it upside down. And since we're here, I want to also make note of this. Earlier in the presentation, I was saying that sometimes the manufacturer will say, in the winter time, just turn over your downspout or turn over your diverter instead of taking it out. But see, I just really think that you will get issues with the ice forming clumps and then not being able to go down your downspout, and you'll get clogging. So that's why I recommend removing your diverter in the winter time. So if you turn it over, it's easier to get out, and then just kind of squeeze the sides. It looks kind of like a Darth Vader helmet, and it's May 4th. That's what it reminded me of. Anyway, side note, tangent. And then remove your diverter and put on your winterization cap, which looks like this. You use the same screws that you use to install your diverter, and then put it in a place where you'll remember where it is for the next spring. When I just installed mine, right before this rain, I did have to add in soap to get the diverter back in. You're also going to be removing your hose, your fill hose. And when you're installing your fill hose, it's much easier to install if you put soap around the outside and then insert it into the gasket for the fill gasket, which is where it goes into the barrel and then into your diverter as well. So just remember that when you are hooking it up next year. I also wanted to show you my favorite spigot, which who has favorite spigots? I do. So I just wanted to show you really quick the typical spigot that you will have on your house will usually have like a circle or one that looks like this. And these are very small holes. I don't even think you can see any light coming out of that. The light is on and you can't even see any light in the spigot. And that is because the hole is so small. It's just a really small opening. And on your house spigots, it doesn't matter that they're small because you have water pressure. So even if you only have it open a little bit, water will still come out. But as I stated earlier, with rainwater, there is not any water pressure. So having a spigot that is a full port hose bib spigot will help you keep you from being frustrated by how slowly the water is coming out. So I don't want you installing your rain barrel, being all excited and then irritated at me because it's taking so long for the your bucket to fill. So here, now you can see you can see the light. This is a large opening. These plastic ones are my favorite. By having it in line, that means it's open. And by having it be a T, that means it's closed. So closed when you install it, and then that's open again. So full port hose bib, these work so much better. These are the best ones that I have found, and you're not waiting forever for the water to come out. Okay, so I want to show you this really quickly. I don't know how much time we have left, but so this is the fill hose that you will receive. This is the smallest that it will go. And as I was mentioning earlier, it does go out 3 feet. So you might be thinking, oh, I have a perfect place 3 feet away, but see, this is what happens. It sags and then the water will not go uphill and it will not get into your barrel. So try to put your rain barrel as close to your house as possible so that you don't have any issues with your barrel not filling up. And finally, a drill. So you will need a drill. I mentioned I'm not handy, but this is one of the things that I have noticed and wanted to share with you. So here for this particular kit, the Colorado Rain Catcher kit, what happens is you get this drill and you get those 3 different hole saws. So you just remove this nut and you insert the drill onto it. The same drill can be used for all 3 hole saws. So you just change them out, which is nice. And so when you're putting them on your drill, and these just insert into your drill, and you can use it like so. But for those of you who aren't handy, this I think might really help you. For those of you who are handy, just bear with me. So on a drill, it can go reverse or forward, so clockwise or counterclockwise. And so I didn't think that really mattered when drilling. It does. So on these, you can see here the way that the drill goes. These are meant to be drilled clockwise. So what happened is I didn't know that my drill was on counterclockwise, and I drilled the hole. First of all, it takes longer and it's more difficult to drill it backwards. And additionally, what was happening is because I was putting pressure on it, I actually ended up unscrewing this component. And so this whole piece fell into my barrel. And it was the one with the screw caps. And so it was annoying. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it did take me a while to get the piece out of there. So to save you all the frustration and with that, just make sure that your drill is set to clockwise and so that you're drilling it correctly. And that is all I have for show and tell. And I'm happy to answer any other questions in our last few minutes that we have.
Yay, thank you. Yeah, I wish all of our webinars had a show and tell element. That's so fun and just like makes it so much easier to kind of see things and kind of know all the pieces. We do have a question about where folks can get the spigot that is your favorite.
Yes. So this spigot, Colorado Raincatcher sells them individually.
Great.
And I think they're like $3. So go to their website. That is on the presentation that I'll be sending you. And in their product page, you can just buy just the spigot.
Great, perfect. And we did still have somebody asking about your gutter recommendation.
Oh,
if
yes.
you have that name offhand, I'm happy to share it in the chat or in a follow-up email.
Oh, I'm going to have to share that with the resources because I cannot remember.
Great. Then be on the lookout for that in the follow-up email. It'll send automatically 24 hours after this webinar. So tomorrow at 5:30 or so, and it'll have the slides. We also recorded this webinar as well. So that will be on Resource Central's YouTube page. Give me a few days to upload it. Jessica will also have that on her resources, her website as well to be able to share. So you can rewatch all of this, you know, much more in depth than a 45-second video on how to do it, maybe a bit more helpful. Great. And we do have one other question that just came in. Let me see. Sun exposure, for how long these parts and materials will last? Do you need to kind of replace them frequently? Have you needed to replace any on your end?
I haven't had to replace any. You know, you can get, there are metal options and plastic options for like the spigot, but it's thicker material plastic and I haven't had any problems with it. I would say there might be a potential for like the top cracking or breaking. It depends how you're storing it. So if you're storing your barrel in the winter, like in a garage, then it'll last longer than if you're storing it out in the elements all winter long. So you know, that might factor into your longevity, just depending on how you kind of take care of it. But I mean, these plastic materials, they're going to last a long time. They're high quality, durable materials. And so I wouldn't, the things maybe to look for is the seals cracking. So that might be something that you have to replace, but these are, as a part of like the whole kit, these are inexpensive. And so just, yes, you might have to replace some, but I haven't had to replace any yet. And they're easy to find, kind of those replacement pieces. So
great.
Great
awesome.
question.
Yeah, this was super helpful. I learned a lot. I put my email, turfremoval@resourcecentral.org. It's not coming up as a clickable link, but that should be the correct spelling of everything. If you still have questions about this presentation, feel free to email me there. I know Jessica's information is in the slides, again, that we will send out tomorrow, and she just put that in the chat as well. So any questions at all, feel free to reach out. But thank you so much for joining us for the last 2 hours. This is our last webinar of our 2021 season. So super fun, super informative. Thank you to Jessica for kind of ending the year with us. And yeah, we'll be sending out more information soon. I'll stay online if there's any other questions. But thank you everybody for attending.
I will as well. So if you have any questions, and I love talking about rainwater harvesting, so email me anytime.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.